Ever since I actually created that video when I actually decided to switch from Elsword to Final Fantasy XIV, that's been roughly almost a whole entire year now at this point, and I actually played through the whole entire game of the whole Shadowbringers expansion, gone through all the offering has to offer, from doing all the extreme trials that Shadowbringer has to offer, and into the very high-end content to challenge any one of us that wants to take on the more extreme versions of the normal raid that we used to do before. In this case being, it's going to be the Savage mode. And after playing all through that, I can probably say Final Fantasy XIV is for those players that actually do want the traditional MMORPG that fulfills the classic tank, healer, and DPS classes that assigns each player to do a specific role when it comes to doing normal dungeon runs, to doing extreme trials, and even the Savage content I've been recently doing for the past 3 months ever since its release. And for that actually defines what type of endgame content that we players should be looking for. And I just don't want to really draw out too much out of Elsword, because majority of us that used to play Elsword grew up with it. We've been through a lot of times together with it, and ever since it's been stumbling apart to the point that I can't really like it anymore, I actually have to search out for other different games that I actually would like to enjoy. And obviously there's several different choices that can go out there, such as just Maple Story 2, and then there's a lot of different games out there that do offer that same MMORPG tradition, but they actually have their own way of making it so-called unique. Recently there's Phantasy Star Online 2, which just came out for the North American server, but I would like to actually have to exclude that one because that's actually a totally different game that I have yet to experience. So I'll probably just leave it out of the blue just for now for the sake of this video. Alright, so talking about Final Fantasy XIV itself, I spend more time to play all the content it has to offer, like I said before, and those type of content is actually what I like to see from any of the games I like to play, because there's actually these two tiers of difficulty that you can take on, and both modes actually do have their, let's just say, amount of dedication or difficulty that each of them have. Starting from the extreme trials, that's actually sort of the stepping stone for those new players that actually want to take on high-end content, and most of the mechanics you actually still have to learn, and each of the roles such as tanks, healers, and DPS actually have their own significant things they have to worry about, so that you don't have to wipe out the whole entire party. But the thing is, with extreme trials, some of the mechanic is not as super sensitive as you would actually want to take on Savage content, which does require the whole party to cooperate. It's very forgiving in the way that, it's just say 2 DPSs die on your party and you actually have to pull up this next mechanic. There's obviously a lot of opportunity that you actually can pick up your teammates that die by resurrecting them, and you can still pull it off with a clear. And with that, it sort of seasons them enough to show what type of mechanics you should be expecting for if you actually want to jump into the next level tier. In this case, it's going to be the Savage Mode Raid series. And obviously, if you actually want to jump into that very high-end content, it's actually your job just to know every single mechanic that the whole entire raid, and everyone in your party has to know what they're doing. Otherwise, if you make one mistake or if one person dies in your party, it's going to be very hard for the whole party to pick up on, because it's very mechanic sensitive, and if that one person is not alive or doesn't know what he's doing, it's going to end up the wipe of the party, and they actually have to start the whole mechanic all over again. And with all those reasons I actually have to set above, there's this very big obstacle that I see myself personally and a lot of players that actually want to get these type of things. It's actually anxiety and some nervousness when it comes to doing these type of content. And you're going to get this feeling saying that, I'm going to mess up a lot much, or I'm not going to remember these mechanics. All these thoughts that you actually been giving to yourself is actually discouraging you for taking on this type of content. But if you really want to dedicate yourself, you're going to have to jump over that barrier that you created by yourself. And if you actually know anyone in your community that usually do these type of things, you have that resource just to jump in there and try to get yourself exposed to it, because most of the time when it comes to these things, the things you see on on YouTube or what people say about it, it seems a lot harder than it seems. But once you start jumping into it and sort of exposing yourself, and if you actually create this one group that you can hang out with your friends or a community, they can actually help you out in understanding what the mechanic is, what you need to do, and some of the requirements that you need to pull off just to clear the whole tower mode itself. you have that resource out there. There is people in the Discord server or in the forums or the whole community that they create behind the background of the game. There's a lot of people that are willing to help you out with it. It's just the thought process you actually put on yourself because you just feel like you're gonna hold down the whole entire party. And that's obviously the problem that happened to me when I actually want to take on these things. I've just been telling myself like I don't want to do it because like I just don't see myself pulling it off of this whole entire mode because it's very demanding and such. And it's just these thoughts I actually have to conquer, and that was until I had to put those thoughts aside and just jump in the pool, get myself exposed to it, go through a couple wipes, and each wipe you do for each of the time you do with these modes, you learn something new. You learn not to make that same mistake again, and then during the next time, you do a lot more better. And that's what happened for me for the whole entire season of Shadowbringers in 5.2 with the Echoes of the Fallen Star. And I started doing it very first one, and obviously that's been quite a very terrifying experience for me to go through because there's like very time sensitive mechanics that I actually have to learn, and if one person messes up, it just wipes the entire party. So that's the thing I just had to deal with for this whole time process. And obviously there's actually these two quote-unquote options that I see a lot, and that's either between, let's just say I'll call myself a freelancer. That technically means in my term is you actually decide to jump on the party finder and go by whatever progress that each party finder has to actually offer and just jump on from there. And obviously the very big advantage of doing that is more of a personal progression to yourself. So if you actually happen to learn to a specific point of this mechanic, you can actually decide to just skip through all the mechanics you learned before and start with the place that you want to learn or you need to pick up on. But obviously by doing that is you're kind of leaving out the consistencies of a static party, which I would talk about later, and you won't have a consistent group that is at the same progression as you are, and you actually have to find a party finder that actually is offering the same progression as you are. And when it comes to these things, you don't know these party members, you're just basically going out at the random, just trusting them that they know what they're doing. But there's sometimes they may do it right, but there's some instances that like they decide to make a party but they didn't know what they're doing in the first place. So there's obviously that very big risk if you actually want to be a freelancer. And for the other type of player that actually wants to take on the high-end content, it's going to be the static groups. And these are actually the very static groups that wants to keep the whole entire original party into one group, and they're willing to go through all the progression each of the either the extreme trials or savage tier, and they learn it all together. And the very big advantage of that is you're going to be at the same progression as anyone else. So when you actually decide to jump into doing some prog parties or something like that, you all know what they're doing. You all have been through it together. You know what you guys doing and such. And consistency is the key of being in a static party. But obviously, there's a very big disadvantage of having a static is obviously if you actually want to do some, let's just say you want to do personal progression even further to the content your static would do. And there's going to be some time coordinations that you actually have to coordinate with your other fellow party members or static group even, and you have to coordinate in some time. And there's some instances that like if one person drops out because they actually have their own personal reason to do so or just couldn't make it, that's going to really hit the static group very hard, and they actually have to find a substitute replacement that can actually do the content with them. And problems with that is if that sub person that's subbing in for the whole entire static group doesn't know what they're doing, they're going to have to start from point A just to learn through the mechanics again just to catch up where they are. So obviously being either a freelancer or in a static group actually has their pros and cons. It just depends like on what type of style you want to tag on these contents. But for me though, I actually went through the process of going through the party finder and going for parties that actually are in or almost the same progress as I am with all these high-end content. And if I happen to do good with the group, well, that's just a lucky group. But if there's some instances that we couldn't reach into it, and well, I gotta suck with the deal with the problem and just deal with it. And from the time when the patch 5.2 released around the month of February until now of the month of May, it took me that long just to complete all the Savage tier raids that the 5.2 has to offer. And from my experiences just doing all that, it's been quite a ride that I'd like to do it again sometime soon for the next further expansion, because obviously there to challenge you to see if you know how to play your class well, and obviously if you actually know how to pull all the mechanics that the game has to offer, and if you actually have them pull through all the stresses and all the stuff that the boss throw at you, you're going to be rewarded very tremendously with the endgame gear that each of the patches has to offer. And if you manage to do that for roughly a month or two, you already have access to the best gear and armor to the whole current expansion as of for now, and you can start pouring all the collection of gears and such into your alternative characters so that they actually can be at the same power level. And of course, there's those players who actually do not want to take these type of things because they feel all the anxiety. They do not have to worry, because as each expansion goes, they're going to release some form of content or some function that allows them to have access to the same power level gear as the people that actually did the Savage tier raids. And it's going to take some time for them to get those contents, and no player will actually feel behind when it comes to getting their gear to the best gear as possible in the current expansion. No one will feel behind, but there's different ways of attaining them. And so that actually will conclude my year of review of Final Fantasy XIV at this point, because it gave me such a good ride, and I would like to keep on this going because it's been a game that I've been enjoying quite so much. But when it comes to riding the Elsword though, there's some things I do miss from that game, such as the very fast pace the game has offered and all the quote-unquote combo sequences that you can do just to keep the enemies mob up in the air, and then you can just link by skill and such. But for now though, Final Fantasy XIV is going to be my new home for everything I do regarding anything PvE, and sometimes I might jump into the PvP contents, but that's not such a strong point for the Final Fantasy XIV anyway. So yeah, such a new game that I like to play for as long as I could just play at this point. So I am going to keep playing Final Fantasy XIV for the meantime, and thank you so much for watching this video of my reaction and some thoughts behind Final Fantasy XIV ever since I decided to leave Elsword. So if you enjoyed this video, you know what to do, but if you don't like it, you can just say whatever you want with it. So thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video.